problems that plagues beginning casters and intermediate casters trying to advance to maybe longer lines or harder to cast setups is they're dragging their line through the water. All of Spey casting is pretty much about how not to drag your line through the water. And if you've watched Simon's single Spey video, he talks about how in the old days, before they even knew how to do a single Spey, they would just drag the line into position and then they'd cast it. As Spey casting advanced, you know, they learned how to do a jump roll and a single Spey, and Simon invented the snake roll. All kinds of different ways to cast, all designed to keep you from dragging your line through the water. So, you know, the spiral pickup, that's about not dragging your line through the water and lifting your line out of the water. It's not just a fancy cast. It's the best way to get a sunk line out of the water. Spiral pickup. Or the snake roll. The snake roll is designed so you can keep your rod tip up in the air and cast. The big problem I see though is guys like brand new casters, they simply forget or haven't been taught that the best way to get your line up and into place and get the slack out of the line and prepare for a cast is by keeping your elbows right here, keeping your hands in this box, and lifting straight up to lift the line out of the water. And then when you've got the line out of the water, then you can do something like that, okay? There's a 70-foot line, and I can do everything I need to do keeping my hands in front, okay? I want my hands in front. Keeping my elbows in is not about my elbows, it's about what my hands do when my elbows are not back here. I want my elbows tight so I can do everything with my bottom hand and with the rod tip in the air. The bottom hand is what you pry with. This is the fulcrum, okay? So if we were gonna pry a rock out of the ground, you have to use the pry bar correctly. And with a Spey rod, you got to use your pry bar correctly. And I do that by keeping my hands here and keeping the rod tip up in the air as much as I can. And so I'm not just blowing smoke. This is a true thing that will help new casters or guys trying to advance, you know. Okay, there's a 70-foot head and I can do everything I need to do keeping my hands out in front. Guys, you're casting the Skagit line, you know, and pretty happy with his casting, and then goes to cast a longer line, and the first thing he does is he tries to drag the line through the water to get it into position, and it's just so much work. So pretty soon dragging the line through the water and then trying to muscle it everywhere. So going from thinking that you got it all figured out and then a little bit longer line throws you all off because you're not keeping your hands in this box, keeping your elbows tight. I read Zach's book on Spey casting, and that really made me realize that there's more than one way to skin a cat. You know, everybody casts a little bit different, and so there's very few things to be dogmatic about. But the one thing that I think we should all be dogmatic about is the Spey cast should not hurt your body, and you should have fun and love it. Those are the only two things. If it's hurting you or you're unhappy, then that's seriously when it's time to change things up. And I'm not, I don't just do this thing I'm talking about, the hands in the box, elbows tight, or at least one elbow tight, without, not just pulling it out of my hat. I've been a group of men, strong, macho, tough guys, learn to Spey cast. And they all have, they're casting big flies. They're doing everything kind of the hard way, but they're men. They're tough. They don't care. They want to fish big flies. They want to cast far. They want to do all that stuff. And so we just worked with them, and they improved. But then one of them brought their wife, and she's an avid outdoors woman and a pretty fervent fly fisher. Not a lot of experience, but enough to get it done. And so we were teaching her to Spey cast. And her biggest problem was, besides not being a big, tough, macho guy, which really wasn't a problem, it was a blessing, but she was sore because she'd been paddling rafts for the last few days, so she was sore. She didn't have a lot of strength. And so, if you just give her the standard beginner Spey casting lesson and you don't really emphasize using your hands correctly and using the lever correctly and keeping the line off the water and not dragging the water. So she's doing some kind of Spey cast and, doing all the stuff that most of us did when we were starting out, throwing it and just using very little bottom hand, just all top hand, just like we all do. So when I got my chance to work with her, I realized she's casting a heavy Skagit rig. So the first thing I did was got her my Scandi head, okay? 450 grain airflow compact Scandi head, floating mono leader, so she would have something manageable. You don't want to start your fly fishing, Spey casting journey with a super heavy outfit. You just don't. Scandi lines are the way to go. So she's got a 31-foot Scandi head on there with a mono leader. The Spey head, Skagit head with the sink tip, is 30 foot also. The leader's just a little shorter, but the fly's heavier. So she gets this little Scandi rod in her head, it's 13.68 weight max catch, and that immediately made things better. And then I taught her to keep her elbows here, keep her hands here, pull with the bottom hand, and stop the rod, okay? So when she could do that and she learned how to properly handle the rod and how to grip the rod, okay, so she was a lady, and it was very important because she was fatigued, she was getting sore, she was sore already, but so you tell her, hey, put your hands wider apart so you have more power, okay? If you're a strong man, you can hold your hands closer together and really get the line speed going. But if you're not, or if you have a shoulder problem or, whatever, it helps to spread your hands apart and grip the rod properly in the same way every time. I don't go through a big ordeal about gripping it lightly. I just don't drop it. And hold on to it the same way every time. Learn how to do line management the same way every time. And then keep the elbows here, lift, take advantage of that fulcrum. Okay, keep your hands in front, keep them in a box, keep them up in the air. Take a little time to learn that part right, and do not drag your line through the water. That will wear you out quicker than anything. Figure out some way to keep the rod in the air, to get the anchor where you want it, even if you have to set it a couple times when you're learning. So I'm not concerned about the elbows being tight for the sake of the elbows. I'm concerned about the hands being here so you can get some leverage on your rod. To get the line in position, if you're gonna cast it, you get your hands here, push with your bottom and pull up and get that line out of the water before you set the anchor. That's for the double spey.